In the global village of conflicting ideologies and complexities, understanding systems and schemes through awareness and social reconstruction becomes expedient.
They never told you how you offended them?
I'm not on trial, so I can't go before
Join the radio man, Edmondo Bilo, on state affairs for local and international politics, security, extensive economic analysis, interviews, and world power play.
Nigerians must choose the path they want to follow. Follow the same looters and sponsors of violence who control the political structures or encourage the formation of a new leadership team.
Be a global citizen and join the radio revolution on State Affairs. State Affairs with Edmond Obilo. Radio just got deeper. State Affairs with Edmond Obilo is live.
Welcome to another class of politics and power. It's a class of history where we learn and unlearn as we discuss the issues of the past for the sake of the future. It is important that I state clearly the task before this generation. It starts with the mind. The mind is the engine of the state. Winston Churchill says the empires of the future are the empires of the mind. The colonialists worked on the mind of the African to suit their aims. It is a mind game. As they conquered the mind, they expanded the exploitation of the human and the material resources of the African. The structures of exploitation were handed to indigenous leaderships at independence to continue the expansion, and the African suffers. It is the failure of the African to engage in constructive mind examination and re-engineering that has exposed it to the political and economic uncertainties of the time, resulting in religious and ethnic crisis, poverty, ruthless corruption, and politics of deceit. It is not really about the shrine, church, or mosque. Religion is love and peace. It is the reluctance by the African to remodel the social structures handed to it that encourages greed, oppression, and hate. The structures emphasize religion and ethnicity over merit. They throw up the visionless as leader and seek the consolidation of the status quo. According to Francis Fukuyama, things that happened hundreds or even thousands of years ago continue to exert major influence on the nature of politics. He posits that the understanding of the functioning of contemporary institutions is linked to the knowledge of their origins and the forces that created them. This is the task before this African generation, and the task excites me. Welcome to this edition of State Affairs, coming to you from State Affairs Studio, streaming from Ibadan, the capital of Oyo State in Nigeria. Join us and let's learn. I am Edmond Obilo, and I'm happy to be back. Tell your friends that we are streaming on YouTube. On Friday, I reviewed the book, Nigeria on Gunpowder, The Climax of Misrule. Remember this book? That was the book I reviewed on Friday. The author of the book was in the studio. I'm talking about Victor Olutaiwo. On that edition of the program, we looked at chapter 8 of the book. That was the chapter we looked at. And you can find the recording, the streaming of that program on this YouTube page. And remember, you can always get this book on udarabooks.com. So you go on udarabooks.com and you can get a copy of this book. There are WhatsApp numbers pinned to this post. You can get this book through those WhatsApp numbers. So, if you missed that edition of the program, it is on this YouTube page. Go back and listen. It was interesting. It was an eye-opener. And today, we are still on that part. The part of examining history. And the book we are looking at today is this book. Have you read it? Samuel Ladoke Akintola, In the Eyes of History. A book written by Femi Kehinde Esquire. A classical work of history. If you read this book, you would understand why we are where we are. Incisive, written in a clear and lucid language. It's a great read. And here we are, examining, reviewing a chapter of the book. But in reviewing that particular chapter, we will almost go through all the chapters, because the history about Ladoke Akintola is the history of the Western region. It is the history of the crisis in the Western region. It is also the history of the first military coup in Nigeria. So welcome. Let's do this together. Honorable Femi Kehinde, it's good to have you on State Affairs.
Edmond, good afternoon.
How are you today?
Oh, I'm good.
Yes. So my guest is here. You wrote this book.
Yes.
Why did you write this book?
As a student of history, as a lawyer, George Santayana said, "Those who do not know history are doomed to repeat its failures." I have seen politics and politicking as it is being played in Nigeria. I've been a practitioner of the current political tide, having been a lawyer of about 40 years, and having also started as a councillor in a local government in 1987 on a zero-party platform, and subsequently elected to the House of Representatives of the National Assembly.
I will come back to you. Ayo, can you put a picture on the screen? I want to make a little adjustment and we will come back. Remember, Honorable Femi Kehinde is my guest on State Affairs. So, stay with us.
State Affairs with Edmond Obilo is live.
Yes, Honorable Femi Kehinde, you were telling us why you wrote the book.
And I started as a student of history in the university for 2 years, between 1978 and 1980. I had sufficiently honed my skill in historical research and writings before I moved to study law. And I felt history has not been kind to its players, most especially in discussing the Akintola-Awolowo tangos. One, because Akintola died young at 56. Awolowo died at 78. And Awolowo had the advantage of the media. Akintola, as a result of his early demise, didn't enjoy this. And the press, the Lagos-Ibadan axis, were not too favorable to the opposition, which the Akintola tendency represented then. In 2016, when it was 50 years of Akintola's death, I delivered a lecture at the Trenchard Hall at the University of Ibadan on Samuel Ladoke Akintola, which I called Samuel Ladoke Akintola in the Eyes of History, a biography and postscript. The success of this endeavor, well-attended lecture, well-publicized lecture, encouraged me to go full blast, to go further into a very, very deep and robust research about the life and times of these highly misunderstood Nigerian statesmen. And in 2017, we were able to launch the full blast biography of Akintola, which I call the magnus opus of his story. It is enchanting, it is revealing, and it touches so many aspects of the personalities involved in the imbroglios, how they started their journey in life, both Awolowo and Akintola. Awolowo and Akintola were very friendly in the Nigerian youth movement in 1943. They both supported Ernest Nkoli against Samuel Akinsanya, the Odemo of Isera, when Dr. Kofo Abayomi resigned from the Legislative Council to pursue a further study in ophthalmology in the United Kingdom. They were Jolly Good fellows. In fact, on this day, after the loss by Odemo of then later Odemo of Isara, he described Akintola and Awolowo as misguided youths.
Misguided youths?
Yes. And following these trajectories, Akintola left Ogbomoso in 1930, having qualified as a school teacher at the Baptist College and Seminary in Ogbomoso in 1930. He entered the school in 1925, and he was appointed by the Baptists as a school teacher in Lagos to teach at the Baptist Academy in Lagos. He was a teacher of biology, general knowledge, and science. And for 12 years, SLA was a teacher. He found the life of a school teacher, the drudgery of that life, perhaps lack of career prospects, very unenticing and unappealing. He resigned, and he first got employment with the Nigerian Railways. He was there for some few months before the profession of journalism attracted him, and he joined the daily service of Ernest Ekoli, where he rose steadily and became its editor. Very promising editor. He was editor, and in 1946, because he supported the colonial government against the labor strike of the coal miners in Enugu at the Hiver Valley, he was given a 1-year scholarship to study journalism at the Fleet Street School of Journalism in London. He got to London in 1946, completed his studies, and moved immediately to study law, and was called to the bar in 1949. And if you look at the life of Awolowo and Akintola, you will see some kind of similarities in their sojourn. Awolowo also started as a school teacher. He was admitted to Wesley College, Elekuro Ibadan, in 1927. And that was the only secondary education Femi Awolowo had. And it was just 1 year of secondary education. He found the life of a thereafter school teacher very unencouraging and unattractive. And he deliberately failed himself in college so that he could leave the bond that brought him to Elekuro and went into private life. He was a shorthand typist. He was a stenographer. He was a produce merchant. He was everything he could lay his hands upon.
He was later a journalist.
He was, before he became a journalist, then he was employed back at the Wesley College as a stenographer. After some time, he left and went full blast into journalism and trade unionism. He was secretary of the Road Transport Workers Union. And Obade Soja Aderemi was their patron. And it was through this relationship that he was able to navigate his way in 1944 to go to London to study law. And don't forget that Awolowo, whilst a private person, had studied by private tuition to obtain a university degree in commerce, Bachelor of Commerce, which exempted him from London matriculation, and got to London in 1944 and was called to the bar in 1946. You will see that Awolowo became a lawyer in 1944. In 1946, Akintola became a lawyer in 1949. Awolowo was born on the 6th of March, 1909. Samuel Ladoke Akintola was born on the 10th of July 1910, you will see that they belong to the same age bracket. And if you look at their life stories, they had very profound pedigrees. Akintola's father, Akibola, was a textile trader who took Akintola and his mother, Akake Bolade, to Minna in 1914. He relocated, and that was where Akintola started his primary school education. And that was why he was opportuned and privileged to speak very many Yoruba, Nigerian languages of Nupe, Hausa, Igbo, very fluently.
He was more Nigerian than Awolowo?
He was, of course, more Nigerian. He was more linguistic than Awolowo.
Perhaps the reason he was a federalist.
He was a federalist.
Awolowo was a federalist too, wasn't he?
Awolowo was a federalist. But Awolowo believes that you have to be a regionalist before you are a federalist. That was the point of departure. And if you study, and fortunately then it was parliamentary democracy, you get elected from your state constituency. Awolowo believes that with the Egbe Omo Oduduwa that started in London, that they could develop a Yoruba nation that will be a showpiece in the eyes of all the world. And if you look at the motto of the Unity Party of Nigeria, egalitarianism is our national watchword. And the motto of the action group, life more abundant.
But the system of that time encouraged that kind of regional ambition.
There must be a regional ambition because it is from the region that the federal ministers will emerge.
So the region before the federal.
You know, in the first federal cabinet, Action Group produced four ministers from the region to go to the federal. And the ministers were Atoppressed, the Shekiri flamboyant politician and colorful lawyer, Samuel Ladoke Akintola, Femi Awolowo, and Bode Thomas. They were the four sets of Nigerian ministers produced by the Action Group. So you had to start from the region. And when they moved a motion for Nigeria's independence in 1956,
is it 56 or 53?
They moved a motion in 53 that Nigeria should be independent in 1956.
Yes.
Macpherson, the Governor General, could not fathom this. And the Northern said they were not ready for any independence. And the Action Group asked its members, led by Sir Adesoja Aderemi, to resign from the Federal Parliament. And this gave a constitutional logjam. As a matter of fact, on that day, Sardauna of Sokoto Ahmadu Bello, Usman Nagogo, the Emir of Zaria, and top politicians from the north wanted to end the Nigerian nation that day, that they will go back and will not come back again because they were humiliated at the train station.
Yes.
And the northern elements called them, and the British government call them that they are the owners of Nigeria. They don't need to be frightened.
Were they the owners of Nigeria?
By configuration, by British configuration. The British had skewed the Nigerian nation to favor the North.
In terms of size?
In terms of size that you cannot explain. And you know that the principle of demography, the principle of geography, is that the nearer you are to the savannah, to the desert, to the arid region, the lesser the population.
But in the case of the North?
That is the North. But in the case of the North, he defied all principles, all demographic principles from Mauritania. If you come from Mauritania to Cameroon, you are coming towards the coast, you will see that on that descending order, population increases. So when you are nearer the coast, there will be more population. But conversely, it was only in Nigeria that the nearer to the desert, the more the population. The nearer to the coast, the lesser the population.
How do you explain that?
How do we explain this? How do we say that there are 44 local governments in Kano State and there are 20 local governments in Lagos State?
Are you suggesting manipulation of figures?
Oh, the British manipulated. Look, the British, they were afraid of the likes of Femi Awolowo and Azikiwe, Anthony Enahoro and the likes.
Why?
Because they knew that they would not allow them to enjoy their interest in Nigeria, which was purely business, purely commercial.
Why would they not allow them? Were there something special about Awolowo, Azikiwe, and the others?
Because the South, according to them, was more enlightened than the northern region of Nigeria. You remember that the South, we had the first Nigerian lawyer, the first lawyer, there was no Nigeria, in 1861, when there was no Nigerian nation, in Sapara Williams, a Yoruba man. The North produced his first lawyer in the early 50s, in A.G.F. Rasak, the father of the incumbent governor of Kwara State. The first private secondary school in the entire northern Nigeria was of a grammar school, which is just some few kilometers to Osogbo, that was founded in 1948.
Not even in the core North?
Not even in the core North. Ibadan Grammar School was founded in 1913 or thereabouts.
So haven't seen British manipulation.
So as a result of this British manipulation, they had a structure in mind. And the structure they had in mind was the structure of Great Britain. In Great Britain, we had England, Wales, and Scotland. They want to look at England from the prism of northern Nigeria, and Wales representing the south, the southwest, and Scotland representing the eastern region. There is no way, even up to today, that a man from Scotland or a Welsh will be Prime Minister of Britain without the support and endorsement of England. That is where there is even the seat of government. It must be at their terms, at their compromise. And that was England in the northern Nigeria. So they gave them a governor general that was malleable to their interests, Sherwood Smith, that would navigate the way for them.
And he did.
And he did. So they had a very, very comfortable majority in the federal parliament.
Even at independence, do not forget that the North did not gather enough votes to form a government.
The North could not gather enough votes, but the North had majority votes.
Fine.
And all they needed was just splinter votes from either the NCNC or the Action Group.
If the Action Group and the NCNC had gone into alliance, what would have happened?
If they had gone into an alliance, they could still not have matched the majority population of the majority membership of the northern Nigeria.
You know, some have argued that Azikiwe betrayed Awolowo because there was already an alliance talk at the time.
Even up to 1983, there were betrayers. In 1951-52, Akintola, Azikiwe, Nnamdi, Benjamin was to be the first premier of the Western region. He was a member of the House of Assembly in Ibadan, representing Mushin-Ikeja State constituency. He had the support of the likes of Dr. Olorunimbe, of so many elites, Ogusanya, Tos Benson in Lagos. And on the day of election, because it was regional politics, the party that has the majority will produce the premier. Most of the members of the NCNC, as at that morning, that sat on the bench of the NCNC, decided to move one by one, will go and bow before Nnamdi Azikiwe and move towards the Awolowo side.
That's what is called carpet crossing.
And that was the beginning of the problems of Nigeria. A number of the members, like Emmanuel Ebubedike, a man from Ozumbra in Anambra that represented Ajeromi Badagry State constituency, could not fathom what was happening. And 10 years thereafter, he unleashed the terror in his mind when there was problem in the House of Assembly. So, when you look at this and you look at the problems of Nigeria, the problems of Nigeria is multivarious. And Awolowo said, Nigeria is just a mere geographical expression.
Okay, let's come.
Sardauna said, 1914 was the mistake of Nigeria.
The mistake of 1914.
Yes. So if you look at this, and if you follow their history very well, they never believed in a monolithic Nigeria. When they started their politics, they started NPC, Northern People's Congress. They didn't call it Nigerian People's Congress.
Now, let's take Akintola from this point.
Yes.
Northern People's Congress.
Yes.
They didn't believe in Nigeria, really. Was it not a surprise that Akintola, as the premier of the Western region, had to align with a group that didn't believe in Nigeria?
You know human psychology. If you drive your friend away, he will run to your enemy.
Who drove Akintola away?
The system. The elites in the Action Group. Akintola never wanted to be premier of the Western region. He had no such ambition. He was the deputy leader of the action group. Awolowo had a dream which he called flashes of inspiration, that he would become the next prime minister of Nigeria. Akintola was already a federalist and leader of the opposition in the federal parliament. He had been Minister of Health, through which he supported the funding and funding of the UCH. He had been Minister of Aviation, through which he supported the funding and funding of the Nigerian Airways. He had been Minister of Labour and Communication. He had all his life, from 1930 to 1959, lived in Lagos. He had his house on number 20 Ajasa Street on the Lagos Island. Awolowo had always been an Ibadan man. So when all this, the mistake they made, when Awolowo was to leave, because Akintola was not part of the shenanigans, he was never part of the politicking, part of the governance in the Western region. He was busy in Lagos. They needed to provide and produce somebody that was already part of that system to succeed Awolowo. But it would be difficult because if the leader was leaving, it stands to reason and common sense that the deputy leader should succeed him. The deputy leader was Samuel Ladoke Akintola, who was equally qualified.
So when he came in as the premier of the Western region,
on the 15th of December, on the 3rd of November 1959, Chief Femi Awolowo addressed a joint session of the parliament. We have the House of Chiefs and the House of Assembly, that he was ascending further to be Prime Minister of Nigeria. So a lot of people tried to discourage him. As at this time, Awolowo was the man of the moment. He was the man in power as premier. He was the man in government, and he was a leader of the party. Two very heavy powers resided in one person. And the most important of those powers was the control of the purse, governance.
and that you can do only as the premier.
And that you can do only as the premier. When he lost this power, and now had only the power of the leader of the party, he could no longer distribute like G's. He could no longer say, Edmond, you will be the minister for Edo constituency. He could no longer say this, and it would be like that.
But ordinarily, he should have been able to do that as the leader of the party.
As the leader of the party, power is an aphrodisiac.
It intoxicates.
It intoxicates. In politics, one person will be friendly with two leaders. He will listen to Mr. A and go to Mr. B to run him down. He will go to Mr. B and say, this is what Mr. A said. And that was when the dispersal started. Because when Akintola came on the 15th of December, 1959, he had nowhere. Awomolo was his in-law in Odrona. He could have stayed with them. Saka, Anthony Agbaje, at Lafayette Hospital, was his friend. He could have stayed with him, a medical doctor. But he didn't. He stayed in the Okebola residence of Obafemi Awolowo between December 15 and March 1960, when a structure, a dingy, disused building used by a colonial officer, was discovered in the Yagoku area and was found to be good enough and renovated for Premier Lodge. And that was where he stayed from March 1960 till the 15th of January 1966.
When he was killed.
When he was butchered, when he was murdered. So you will see that initially when they started, there was no such enmity between them. But politics came in and divided them.
Is that what politics does?
Eh?
Is that what politics does to friends?
Well, if you allow it.
You have played politics.
I have played politics. And I know that in politics, ordinary song could be as deadly as a bazooka gun.
If you are just joining the broadcast, I am discussing with Honorable Femi Kehinde, the author of the book, Samuel Ladoke Akintola in the Eyes of History. This is the book, and the author of this book is here. Do not forget, this is a class of politics, history, and power. We are looking at this book, but soon I'll come to the chapter about the coup, how politics consumed the premier of the Western region, Ladoke Akintola. Are you interested in getting this book? There are WhatsApp numbers pinned to this broadcast. You can send a WhatsApp message and request to buy this book. Those WhatsApp numbers are the numbers of Udara Books. You can also go on udarabooks.com for interesting titles on politics, power, and history. The bookstore is dedicated to political and historical books. So you can go on the store. There are interesting titles that will educate your mind. I don't know if you've seen this book, Adventures in Power, The Travails of Democracy and the Rule of Law. A book written by Obafemi Awolowo. Awolowo tells the story of the politics of the First Republic in this book. You'll find this book on udarabooks.com. Femi Kehinde is also the author of the book of Rust and Gold, Snippets of History. You see this work? Yes. The author of this work is my guest, but this is not a book we are looking at on this program. This is a class of politics and power. And you can also join the discourse by calling the numbers pinned to this broadcast. You can call on WhatsApp to let us know what you think. So the lines are open for you to join the class. If you have any question for my guest, feel free to ask your question. And you can also leave your comments there. We'll look at your comments as we go. The program is State Affairs. It is coming to you from State Affairs Studio, and we are discussing history, politics, and power. Okay, this is alarm. It's an alarm. So we are going to turn off that alarm The alarm is to remind us of an event. Sadly, we did not turn it off, so we turned off the alarm. Good. So you can join the broadcast as we discuss the issues of history and time. Before we go into the coup, I want to read a part of your book.
Yep.
And you would then explain. You said on page, let's see, yes, on page 173.
Yep.
I want to read.
Yes.
It will be recorded once again that the British Prime Minister, Harold Wilson, at the Commonwealth Prime Ministers' Conference in Lagos in January 1966, warned the host of the conference of an impending military insurrection and offered the Prime Minister, Tafawa Balewa, asylum in one of the British frigates on the Atlantic water. The Prime Minister rebuffed this intelligence report. At Akintola's report, fears and apprehensions as merely hearsay and unfounded. Is this perception the undoing of Tafawa Balewa and Ahmadu Bello?
Yes. You know, from 1962, we had the dispersal in the Western region as a result of the Just Conference, where Akintola was expelled from the party. He formed his own party. There was state of emergency. Majekodunmi came in. Akintola came back on the 1st of January 1963. We were navigating in the wilderness. Awolowo was jailed for treasonable felony, 10 years into Calabar prison, and the West was becoming wild, wild West.
It became a wild, wild West.
Yes, and the West that had been a wise, wise West, that had been the first in all things. When the federal government was paying 3.5 shillings, West was paying 5 shillings per wage. We have first free education, free health services, first secretariat, first housing corporation in Bodija in 1958, the Liberty Stadium that was patterned after Wembley Stadium in the United Kingdom, Cocoa, and all sorts of things like that. The first dual carriage, the Queen Elizabeth Road. But when politics set in, with this dispersal, problems started coming in. There were failed elections. Elections were manipulated, were rigged, both the federal and the regional election. And Oba Ogunrinde came up with an album, with a song, Yoruba Ronu, Ye 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 Yoruba Ronu. We knew there was going to be a cul-de-sac at the end of the day. If you look at the story of Nigeria, in 1898, Sir Lord Frederick Lugard founded the West African Frontier Force with 2,000 soldiers, populated by mainly people, 90% by mainly people of the northern Nigeria, particularly Middle Belt axis. Those were the foundation of the military in Nigeria. And by early 60s, the Sardauna of Sokoto had been going to secondary school to scout for the best brains to come and join the army. People like Babangida, like Dom Kambali, like Bisala and all sorts were headhunted because they believed that something will happen sometime. So when this politicking started And we saw evidently that there was problem. You know, the federal government had wanted to sign an Anglo-British military pact.
The one that Femi opposed
which
vehemently.
the Nigerian university students, headed by the likes of Dr. Kunle Olajide, rioted and went to the parliaments and opposed. Perhaps if there was this military pact, maybe they could have come in. And we had a military that was predominantly populated by the northern Nigeria. And with all these problems, we saw that there was no way the military would not push. Remember, in 1963, there had been a military takeover in our neighboring Togo there.
Yeah.
With Sylvanus Olympio.
He was killed. And
And
Yadema took over.
And his son is still there now.
For Yadema.
Yes. So, he believed Tafawa Balewa was a very simple man. Very good-natured man. Very unassuming man. As a matter of fact, when he died, he had only 24 pounds in his bank account. The British, Harold Wilson, attended the British Commonwealth Prime Minister's Conference in Lagos and had an intelligence and security report that the military would strike. And in that conference, he called Tafawa Balewa and told him that the military will strike. They will kill you. I don't want you to die. We want to offer you asylum in one of the British frigates on the marina on the Atlantic. A core Muslim. He said, life and death belongs to the Almighty Allah. On the 14th of January, 1966, Samuel Ladoke Akintola had become restless. Prior to that time, he had undergone training in weaponry from the army, from Colonel Agema, the commander of the Brigade of Guards in Ibadan. He said he had a premonition that something untoward would happen. And on the morning of the 14th of January, he traveled on a Nigerian Airways flight with some of his close confidants and aides, like Chief Richard Akinjide, whom I interviewed, Chief R.O. Obaleke, who was his principal private secretary, a man from Awe. Obaleke got to the Premier's lodge, and the Premier told him that we will go on a journey this morning. Call your wife, I will talk to her, and park your car here. And they went to the airport. Before that time, Ladoke had been very restless. In the night, he would drive from Ibadan to Ogbomoso for no just cause. I will come back almost immediately. And when he got to the Sadauna of Sokoto in Kaduna, he met Colonel Agema of the Ibadan Brigade. He met Colonel Ralph Shodeinde. He met Mai Malari and some northern elites and told them that the military will strike and that they will be killed. And they started to laugh that, why are you so worried? Nothing like that. With all these army officers surrounding us, nothing like that. This is your commander from Ibadan. Aro Obaleke said the Premier gave him some money to go and look for some books at the bookshops in Kaduna. so that he could have a private audience with the Sardauna. And all bothered on a phone call to the man in Lagos that the military will strike. He got back because Ibadan airport had no night landing facility. So Obaleke told him that they had to leave in quick time because otherwise they would not be able to land at the airport. So they got back to Ibadan around 7 p.m. and they went straight to the government house. A day before that, he had sent Fadirira to Ogbomoso to go and prepare his Ogbomoso residence ready for a state visit. Haile Selassie of Ethiopia was visiting Nigeria and he wanted to have a private audience with Ladoke Akintola in Ogbomoso. So Fadirira was already in Ogbomoso. Unfortunately for Ladoke, Yomi Akintola, his wife, and infant children, and their maid were in the premier's lodge with the premier when the military struck.
Before we go further, I want to read from your book. Page 172. This is the book I'm reading from. Samuel Ladoke Akintola Omodele died apparently and perhaps as a result of an overdose of sleeping pills. After her death, Akintola was beginning to have a second thought about his ability to continue with the crisis and asked rhetorically whether the whole warfare was worth it at all. At this time, he was fagging out.
Yes.
It was really a crisis.
He was already fagged out.
Awolowo was in prison.
Awolowo was in prison.
1965 election was a disputed election.
Yes.
You think that election was rigged, right?
It was rigged.
It was not a fair election.
No. When you had power and you wanted to sustain power and you have opportunity to manipulate, you will.
He manipulated with the aid of the North.
Because E.E. Iswa was a federal resident electoral commissioner. He was appointed by Tafawa Balewa. And even the regional elections, Akintola appointed the umpires. They will announce a winner on the radio. In another 5 minutes, another winner will emerge. You know, as at this time, Michael Okpara and Mama H.I.D. Awolowo had formed a coalition, which they called OBGA. Eastern Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation had its mast in Awolowo's Okebola house. As the state radio was announcing results, the station resident in Awolowo's house will also be announcing another result. There was violence, there was chaos. People were already divided. Politics had become very, very dangerous. And you remember in 1965, Akintola had prepared a state broadcast that it was to address the people of the Western region.
Go ahead.
The people of the Western region went to the Radio Nigeria with the master tape. The continuity announcer was to play the tape when a masked gunman, came into the studio and at gunpoint asked the continuity announcer to remove the tape and slotted the anti-Akintola tape there, and the man disappeared.
And that man might be Wole Soyinka?
Was charged before the newly appointed Justice Kehinde Esho.
And that's the mystery
The
gunman.
mystery gunman, if you read Kehinde Esho's book.
Yeah.
So politics was already very, very dangerous.
Now, let me read more. You said being a soft man,
Yes.
he had even contemplated resigning his position and leaving the affairs of the West to Chief Remi Fani Kayode, the father of this present
Femi, yes.
Fani Kayode, his deputy, who was generally believed to be strong, toughened, and hardened. Faderera Samuel Ladoke Akintola's wife has also suggested this to him, insisting Ladoke was too feminine. Was he feminine?
He was feminine.
He wasn't tough?
He was not tough. You see, Ladoke was a great orator. He was streetwise, he was worldwise. When you talk to Ladoke, you ask him that maybe they have to go and kill these people, they have to go and kill these people, they have to go and kill these people. You will not ask them. If we kill Mr. A, we kill Mr. B, we kill Mr. C, who are we now going to govern? That was, he was a Baptist deacon. He was a Baptist lay reader. He was a Yoruba fundamentalist. He was verbally gifted, very gregarious. He was street and world-wise. But in terms of physical pugilism and display of physical strength, Ladoke could not match Fani Power. Fani Kayode was called Fani Power. He was leader of the Action Group Youth Movement before he left for the NCNC. He was a brilliant attorney. He, alongside Rotimi Williams and Bode Thomas, founded the very first law partnership in this country. Thomas, Williams, and Fani Kayode. He was a QC. So at this time, he was already beginning to wonder, most especially when Omodele died. Omodele was his confidant. It was Omodele that he sent to England, to the Privy Council, to the Queen of England, to deliver a letter to the Queen when the Action Group appealed against the judgment of the Federal Supreme Court on the interpretation of Section 3310 of the Western Region Constitution.
Which the Action Group won.
They won, the politics. The chief judge of the Western Region was a Ghanaian, Justice Kwashi Idun. He knew he was in the heat of it. When the matter got before him, he sent it to the Federal Supreme Court for interpretation of Section 3310 that says the governor can remove the premier when it appears to him that the premier no longer commands the respect of majority member of the House of Assembly. The question is, does it appear to him in his dream? Or how does it appear to him? And he wrote a letter to S.L. Akintola that there were 86 signatories out of 112 members who had written a letter of no vote confidence on him. It was this letter that was to be debated on the 29th of May, 1962, that caused the problem.
When some people invaded the regional assembly.
The Akintola group knew that if they allowed that passage of that letter, if you take 86 from 102, that means Akintola supporters were just about 26. The best thing for them was to prevent the sitting of that house by all means.
And they succeeded.
Because they had federal might.
Tafawa Balewa used the police.
No, before that, they had met in Akinjide's house in Idishi.
Akinjide was in Idishi then?
Yes.
The same location now?
No, he was living in Idishi, not the present The Rock.
All right.
They had a white handkerchief and they went on a group. The action group went on a group, and the Akintola group carried a mock coffin of Femi Awolowo, who was in jail, to the headquarters of the party, singing, Akintola ò ṣe pa, Akintola ò ṣe pa, ẹ̀yin tẹ́ pété pèrò. Adelabu, Adelabu was died in a motor accident in 1958.
Which of the Adelabu?
Adegoke Adelabu.
Okay, Adelabu, yes.
The grandfather of Bayo Adelabu.
Yes.
So, he called the prime minister that if we allow democracy to have its way, and this election holds, there was no way we could match their strength.
So Awolowo was in charge, really. He controlled the mind.
He was more dangerous out of visibility. He was more dangerous in prison than me outside prison. He was controlling the process. So when they got there, Adeleke Adedoyin was the speaker. And you remember Emmanuel Ebubedike that won election with Zik in 1952, who was not pleased that Zik was not made premier, started to ring a bell. Fire on the mountain, fire on the mountain, fire on the mountain. Adeyi, founding principal of Iditi Grammar School, regional minister, through a chair, they are not nearly missed the speaker. S.A. Tinubu from Iresi, EOK from Akintola's constituency, they started jumping from one seat to the other, shouting, and they're calling chaos. There will be fire, people will be killed, and you saw the gory picture of members trying to scale the walls of the house to escape from the parliament.
And all this led to a state of emergency.
And on that same day, the federal parliament met. Because there was no such law before that date that established by law Emergency Powers Act that gave the parliament power to take over the control of a region for 6 months.
All right. We will take a short break. And in this break, I want us to listen to Sir Olaniwu Ajayi. And we will come back. Olaniwu Ajayi was an Awoist. He was an Awoist in 2016 before his death. At the age of 90, I think, I spoke with him about the North and we will come back after this chat with him.
You said
Do you think the North is ready for a restructured Nigeria?
Well, I will prayerfully hope so, because it is the only blessing that Nigeria may have. But I know they will feel a bit tardy in doing so, because they profit a great deal about the present structure of the country, which is against political geometry, absolutely contrary to political geometry, completely. We are different nationalities, different countries. We don't have proper federal system. We should have true federal system. If you have true federal system, there will be peace and progress in this country. We have been sovereign for 56 years, and we are like a small child of 3 or 5 years who cannot walk. If you compare us with Brazil and Malaya and Singapore and Russia and India, where are we?
Yes, you just listened to Olaniwun Ajayi. Before he died, he left us with this book. Classic. Oh, you see, this book is a well-researched book. You would love to read this book. The documents, he went into the archives, dug out documents about British conspiracy against the Western and Eastern regions before independence. He gave clinical analysis of some of the subjects that eventually led to the first military coup in January 1966, the counter coup in July 1966, and eventually the Civil War. I recommend this book to you. Get this book, Nigeria, Africa's Failed Asset, by Olaniwun Ajayi. You would find it on udarabooks.com. Classical work of history. A thoughtful, well-researched, and revealing account of the behind-the-scenes moves that led to the creation of Black Africa's most populous nation. In this book, Olaniwun Ajayi looks at the shaky foundation on which the Nigerian state is planted in reckless disregard of the settled principles of federalism, leading inevitably to the quagmire in which Nigeria finds itself. The book also analyzes how Nigeria has fared in view of the enormous resources at her disposal, comparing Nigeria with similar countries. The book comes to an almost irresistible answer that Nigeria is fast racing to the bottom, while others similarly situated are pushing up. Get this book on udarabooks.com. You can also buy this book through the WhatsApp numbers on the screen, the numbers pinned to this post. And remember, you can also call those numbers. You can call the WhatsApp numbers to contribute. The program is a class for history Politics and Power. And Femi Kehinde, the author of the book, Ladoke Akintola, In the Eyes of History, is my guest. My guest is a lawyer by profession. He was a member of the House of Representatives from 1999 to 2003, representing Ayedire Iwo Olaoluwa Federal Constituency of Osun State. As a keen student of history, Femi Kehinde researches and publishes articles on key players of Yoruba cultural, political, and economic past. As a politician, he shares his observations and comments on contemporary Nigerian politics through different articles in many Nigerian dailies. My guest is also the author of the book of Rust and Gold, Snippets of History. Do you have this? You need this book. You would find it on udarabooks.com. As we discuss, Honorable Kehinde, let me take you into Awolowo's book. He made some points, then we'll come back to your book. Awolowo in this book, The Travails of Democracy and the Rule of Law, wrote some, revealing perception, his perception of the North at the time. He says here, let's read from page 3. Awolowo said the Action Group campaign in the northern region in 1959 provoked Ahmadu Bello
Seriously.
and the feudalistic leaders of the North.
Very seriously.
And because of that provocation, Awolowo says here, however, for the entire feudal hierarchy, all that was too much for them. That means the campaign of the AG was too much for them. And they, too, must have vowed, like the Saudana, never to forgive Awolowo. A report in the Sunday Express of 20th December 1959 at page 2 summed up the attitude of mind of the hierarchy. Awolowo writes in his book that he's now quoting the paper, I shall divide Nigeria into two and hand them over to my lieutenant. He's quoting Ahmadu Bello now. What Ahmadu Bello said. Awo said in his book that Sir Ahmadu contended that the Northern People's Congress new decision to invade the South politically was a reply to the recent invasion of the North by Southern political parties. He cited a portion in the Quran which says, you have come to our home, and from now on, we shall be taking the battle to your house. He's quoting Ahmadu Bello now. I will continues in the book. Sir Ahmadu Bello claimed that, like his great-grandfather, Shehu Ottoman Danfodio, who, he said after his conquest, divided the conquered country between his two sons. I, too, after conquering the South, we also divide Nigeria into two, to be taken charge of by two of my lieutenants. He said the South had already been handed over to Alhaji Tafawa Balewa, the Prime Minister, and added that before his resignation from politics, he would appoint another lieutenant to take over the administration of the North, he presented a cloak of authority to Balewa. The point here is that Ladoke became an instrument in the hands of Ahmadu Bello to take over the South. Do you agree?
I told you of the problem of human dynamics that brought Samuel Ladoke into open conflicts with his friends, with his comrades and associates. In human history, there is perhaps nobody that will match Awolowo's sagacity, political sagacity, economic wizardry, and gallantry in the governance of the affairs of men. You will remember that even this same Harold Wilson described Obafemi Awolowo as somebody that could have been the best prime minister of Great Britain in terms of his learning, knowledge, erudition, and perception.
Ojukwu said he was the best president Nigeria never had.
Beyond all these rhetorics, Awolowo was a statesman par excellence. Awolowo was not a politician in the strict sense of the word. Awolowo believes in a just, egalitarian, and humane society. Dr. Omololu Loyo, in an interview session with me, who took Awolowo like a father figure, because Awolowo's Oluloyo's father, Horatio, and Obafemi were best of friends. He told him, Baba, you are non-pariah, no equal. But in terms of politics, I hope you will be privileged to interview Dr. Victor Mololulu Loyo, and will give you an expose of what I'm saying. He said, Papa, you cannot tell lies. And these are part of the indices of a politician. Awolowo spent £10 million sterling of the Western Nigeria Development Corporation's money to galvanize for votes in the northern region, to bring what we were already enjoying in the western region to the north. Bought helicopter sign writers. Olaniwa Ajayi will tell you, he was one of the AG leaders that went to campaign for votes for Action Group in the 50s. They will pay for a school field to use for Awolowo's helicopter to land. They will collect the money. When the helicopter is about to land, they will have invaded the entire football field with cows. Nowhere for the helicopter to land. This forced Sardauna Ahmadu Bello to now be campaigning against his wish to source for votes from his lesser mortars. You know the Almejeri principle, if you have, they believe you have. If you don't have, the one that they have, you must go to their house to collect food, to collect this, to collect that. These are the feudal oligarchy, the feudal system that Awolowo wanted to dislodge. But the British, they have skilled Nigeria in such a way that it will be difficult for 1,000 Awolowo to match what they had already planted. Because The Nigeria of their dream can only be encapsulated by a Nigeria that will be malleable to British interests. When they came in 1896, they needed commerce. They started to build train from Lagos in 1896 from Ido to the north. It got to Abeokuta in 1898, it got to Ibadan in 1901, it got to Osogbo in 1903, got to Ilorin around 1906, and down like that. So, because of the British interest, they now found out that there is a prosperous coal mining business in Enugu. It was because of Enugu that they now created another axis of trade from Port Harcourt, passes through Enugu to Kara Namoda. So we had two axes, Lagos to Nguru, Port Harcourt to Kara Namoda. The entire length was 3,506 kilometers. All for British interest.
Is that not what international politics is about?
International politics, you know, the ambition of Britain was to paint the map red. Conquest and conquest and conquest and conquest. Nigeria was within British sphere of interest, economic interest. You know, Britain bought Nigeria for £865,000.
From Godi?
From Sir Tubman Goldie. And they brought in Sir Lord Lugard, who was a major in the army. He was Major Lugard. He had worked with the East India Company, Royal East African Company, before he now joined Royal Niger Company. And when he got here, the first thing he did was to integrate the North, giving them political advantage. You remember that because of what happened to Vorawen Ogbaise in Benin and went into exile in Calabar, Benin was dislodged. If Benin was not dislodged, there was no way we could have a Southern Protectorate. And that was how we had a Southern Protectorate in 1900. In 1903, there was a Northern Protectorate, you know, moving in the version of the fashion of the British. And you remember, like Sardauna said, his grandfather had conquered the North by the Jihad of 1804.
Has conquered the Hausa state.
The Hausa state, they were predominant now. The Fulanis are a very small population. Had conquered. So they were shopping for the same interest. One in 1804, another one around 18. You know, by the 1860s, 1880s, they had devastated the entire Bonny area of the Niger Delta. Kokomingi, Nana Oforiata, and all the likes. King Jaja of Opobo was poisoned with tea.
So at independence, it was the North that would protect that interest.
They believed that because they had protected the North must protect their own interest. North had no educated people. They picked Sardauna. They picked Amadu Bello. They picked Aminu Kano. They picked Tafawa Balewa to go for 1 year teacher training diploma course in England. That was the best of their education and brought them in so that they could govern. But look at the southern Nigeria. Look at the time Benjamin Azikiwe went to Pennsylvania University.
He even came back with a PhD. Awolowo was well read.
Awolowo was well read. Alvan Ikoku was well read. So many of them. So they knew that they could not match the strength, the literary strength of the southern Nigeria.
So, having gotten to this point,
Yes.
do you think it was a patriotic move by those young military officers that struck in 1915? Do you
January
think
15.
Yes, January 15, 1966? Do you think it was a patriotic move?
The coup of January 15, 1966 was lopsided. They did not take advantage of the benefits of history. The 5 major schools, majority of them Igbo guys, Kaduna Nsegu, Okafor, Anuforo,
Ifeajuna.
Ifeajuna.
Nwobosi.
Okay, Ubosi was just picked up in Abeokuta. He was a captain. He was not part of the majors.
He was the one that led the coup
He was the one that...
in the West.
No, he was the one that came from Alamala Barracks in Abeokuta to kill Akintola on the 15th of January in the midnight. Now, when they ganged up out of patriotic zeal, you know, Kaduna is
It was a patriotic zeal.
patriotic zeal, but not well planned. Kaduna Nzegu and Olusegun Obasanjo were best of friends. When Obasanjo was captured in the Congo and taken inside the boot of a car, it was Kaduna Nzegu that alerted the Nigerian command that Oba had disappeared. He used to call Obasanjo Oba. They were very good. The night of that coup, January 15, Obasanjo had just finished a course in England and was in Kaduna and was slept on the same bed with Major Kaduna Nzegu.
He stated it in this book.
Yes.
Nzogu by Olusegun Obasanjo.
He did not tell Oba that they were planning a coup. So on that day, he disappeared, went to the Sardauna's lodge, and on that night, you know, Akintola had left them for Ibadan.
Yes, on the 14th.
On the 14th, and in the midnight. So he met Sardauna, met the wife, met my Malari, met Colonel Ralph Shodeinde, Brigadier Ademulegun, and the likes, and they were all butchered.
Brutal. That was a brutal coup.
And he addressed the press, he addressed the country that they are taking over. And at the same time,
Was it to correct the mistake
to
of Britain?
in fact, their ambition was to bring Awolowo out of prison, to take over leadership of this country.
That was their ambition.
One of their ambitions. Because they were not pleased with the way things were going. But there was no way a military coup could go on in January 1966 without bringing in some northern elements to be part of them.
But there was a Yoruba element in Adewale Ademoyega.
You know, those ones even came in by accident. Adewale Ademoyega was of the short service course from University of Ibadan. Ifeajuna was of the short service corps. They were not combatants. They were ideologue. Even Major Banjo, that now went to fight on the side of the Biafra and captured the central bank in Benin and threw out the money for the Biafra to go and buy ammunition. And that was how Awolowo changed the currency. They invaded Benin, and the governor, David Ejo, had to ride a bicycle from Benin to Dodan Barracks in Lagos. So when Major Okafor, when he led the group in Lagos, they went straight for only Festus Okotie-Eboh,
He was then the Minister of Finance.
the Minister of Finance, and also Tafawa Balewa.
But Azikiwe was not in the country.
Azikiwe went on medical vacation to the West Indies.
So if he was around, they would have taken him out, right?
It was part of the design.
So Azikiwe left in October 1965.
Azikiwe left in October 1965, but they had placed in Dr. Nwafo Orizo as the acting president.
That was after Balewa was
That is
killed.
the,
Okay, yes. Okay. When
before-
Azikiwe left.
When Azikiwe left,
Yes.
the Senate president became the acting president. That
Yeah.
was Dr. Nwafo Orizo. Maybe Zeke was lucky. But Michael Okpara was in Enugu.
But don't forget that Archbishop Macarius was in the east.
And was not touched.
Macarius was in the east and was a guest of Michael Okpara.
And they were not touched.
That was a prime minister. After the Commonwealth Prime Minister's
After
Conference,
the Commonwealth Prime Minister's Conference,
he decided to visit the east.
he decided to visit. But Michael Okpara was not touched. Dennis Ozadebe, our premier in the Midwest, was equally not touched.
But they were not the problem. Were they the problem? The problems were Ahmadu Bello, Balewa, and Akintola. Were they not the problem?
Don't look at it from that prism.
Awolowo was not touched. He was in prison. They would have gone to prison and take him out.
If you say Tafawa Balewa was the problem, Ahmadu Bello was the problem, they represented certain tendencies.
From our analysis so far,
They
the
represent,
North was the problem.
Well, to some group, the North was the problem. And certainly the North was the problem by virtue of its advantage.
And don't forget
And
that
his
Michael
success-
Okpara and Awolowo's wife had come together to form OPGA
Yes,
on the side of Awolowo.
on the side of Awolowo.
So the Coupists wouldn't have taken Okpara out. Perhaps they saw him as a progressive. Not really because he was an Igbo man.
That was why they said that it was a coup against the North. That was why they said it was a coup against the North. You know, on that 15th of January, when they struck, you know, they killed Tafawa Balewa so brutally that they dumped his body somewhere along Ota Road, around Sango. I was discovered by Olusegun Oshoba as a journalist when he had intelligence reports that the Prime Minister had been killed and was dumped there. This is brewing problem. This is incubating problem.
Let's come back to your book. You said the Premier's driver, that is Akintola's driver, confided in the young police officer, Labode,
Yes.
that the Premier was found of this trip because the late night trip from Ibadan to Bomosho afforded him the opportunity of a thoughtful silence and a deep sleep. Prince Adewale Kazim, another known confidant of the Premier, also noticed a Premier whose hands were shivering and could no longer append his signature on a straight line. Prince Adewale noticed this again and advised the Premier, "Baba, why don't you resign?" And the soberly Premier replied, he's made some words in Yoruba, and you interpreted it as, "Adewale, it is too late to resign. It is only death that will end this feud."
Adéwálé kò ṣeé ṣe mọ́. Ikú ni ó parí ọ̀rọ̀ yìí.
And death came.
And settled it.
Did he settle it?
It was to settle, but it started the problems. You know, when they came on the 15th of January from Abeokuta, Alamala Barracks, the captain that came, Wobosa, did not know who Akintola was. Did not know who Fani Kayode was. But they went to pick Fani Kayode in his nearby residence, arrested him, and asked him to take them to the Premier's lodge in the dead of the night. When they got there, and Akintola recognized Fani Kayode's voice, he said, Premier, Emi Fanini. So,
It's me, Fanny.
it's me, Fanny. And he saw from upstairs towards his library some movements. He tried to hide. But unfortunately, Yomi's children, infant children, started to
Yomi
cry.
was his first son.
Was his first son, started to cry and he made. So they knew that that the Premier was inside the lodge. And that was how they went upstairs and shot at the Premier.
I thought he fired at them first.
Because, like I told you, he had learned weaponry training from the Ibadan barracks. So he brought out his gun to shoot. And the gun also showed the direction of the movement. And they were able to trace him. And brought him downstairs to his car side.
Before you narrate that, let me read what you wrote. According to Olabode,
Yes.
2 officers were placed on his right and left hand, as if facing a firing squad, and volley of bullets were hurled at him. The first shot hit Akintola on his forehead, some on his chest, and later the Premier gave up. When he fell down, the leader of the group placed his leg on the Premier's forehead and asked some of his soldiers to rain further bullets on the lying Akintola. The group leader, speaking in various languages, said, according to Olabode, he is a juju man. Perforate him further with bullets. And thus, the end of Are Ona Kakanfo, who had fought a bitter struggle with his tongue, pen, and strength. What a bad way to die.
What a bad way to die.
The soldiers were ruthless.
What a bad way to kill Festus Sokotiebo. What a bad way to kill Tafawa Balewa. What a bad way to kill Sardauna with his wife. What was the wife's offense?
He wanted to die with Ahmadu Bello.
The woman had no choice. They were all gunned down, including military officers there. They were all gunned down, including military officers there.
And there was a counter coup.
There was a counter coup. You know, Aguiyi-Ironsi, Francis Aguiyi-Ironsi, was a major general. He knew nothing about that coup because it was a lower officer school and he could not have been part of the coup. But by virtue of military commandments and the interplay of political forces, Zik was already out of the country. And the cabinet members called themselves to the cabinet office for a meeting. And they asked Nwafa Orizo, the acting president, to swear in my Zana Dipkarima as the acting prime minister because of the disappearance. At that time, nobody knew what was already happening to
Baliwa.
He said no. And under the law, as a lawyer, under the Interpretation Act, an acting president, an acting premier performs the functions of the substantive in law. So if you had sworn in Dipkarima will be the de facto prime minister, whilst we are looking for. He did not, Nwafa Orizo did not listen to his cabinet, to the cabinet members. Francis Agui-Ironsi, Major General, now sent for all the cabinet members for a meeting of all the cabinet members at the cabinet office and asked them to voluntarily surrender power. That he had already discussed power to him, that he had already discussed with Nwafa Orizo. Nwafa Orizo, an Igbo man, Francis Agui-Ironsi, an Igbo man, both wrote speeches, one surrendering power, one receiving power. And that was the end of the First Republic. Before they now knew that this one had been killed and all sorts of things like that. So, Ironsi was a beneficiary of a struggle he was never part of. And that was what brought the counter coup of July 29, 1966.
Let's leave it at this point. It's a very interesting story. And I must say, I envy your power of remembering dates. You have all the dates.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for writing this book of history.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate your intellect.
Thank you very much.
We have been discussing this book. You should have a copy of this book. We are going to put it on Udara Books, but you can get it on WhatsApp. But by tomorrow, we'll put it on the store, or you can get it on the WhatsApp. So go get your copy of this book. Ironsi by Chuksilu Ebunam. Ironsi. Another classical work on Nigerian history. And I'm thinking of bringing Chuksilu Ebunam to this studio. I know he lives in Anambra State, but hopefully we'll have Chuksilu Ebunam in this studio. This is another powerful book of history. This book tells the story of the Nigerian military, of the politics of the First Republic, of the Civil War. Yes, look at this one. Why we struck. Why we struck. Why we struck tells the story of the first military coup in Nigeria. The coup that took place on the 15th of January, 1966. That coup that consumed the premier of the Western region, Ladoke Akintola. This book tells the story of how the coup was conceived and planned together by Majors Nzogu, Ifajuna, and Ademoyiga. The execution of the plan had a lightning effect, and the coup provoked a reaction within the first hours of its commencement, opening the floodgates that culminated in the Civil War. Classic. Get this book on udarabooks.com, and you can get it through the WhatsApp numbers pinned to this broadcast. And this one, Nzogu, Nzogu, written by Olusegun Obasanjo, a book of history. Reading is feeding the mind. So we have created Udara Books for you. Udara Books has more than 400 titles, books on history, politics, and power. One of the best sellers on the store is this book, Nzogu. I think in the last 1 month, we have sold more than 100 copies of this book. It's an interesting read. So go on udarabooks.com and get your copy. Honorable Femi Kehinde, this is your copy.
Thank you very much.
Yes, we appreciate you for coming.
Thank you very much.
To this studio. How do you see the studio?
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm not surprised about the quality and about the outputs of something that comes from you.
Thank you.
Because, Edmond, like I told you, you are redefining journalism. And you are doing a yeoman's job. I'm sure the society is appreciating you, and they will further appreciate you.
Thank you.
Please do not relent, and keep up doing the very good work.
Thank you.
It is a calling, and please take it as a missionary assignment, and the Lord will see you through. Thank you for this beautiful studio in the heart of Oluyole where I live. You have brought this to us, and I'm sure that a lot of people, when they know of this place, will be amazed at what state affairs has turned this place to. Kudos to you, and warm regards to your intellectual zeal and efforts. Unfortunately, the Nigerian society is not a reading society. There is a saying that if you want to hide something from a man, please keep it in a book. You will certainly not, or you may not find it.
The African man.
The African man. Not only Nigerian man. But what you are doing is a kind of reawakening, a kind of new consciousness. You are telling them that all these books are on the social media. There is a world of audio-visual reading. There is a world of YouTube, like what we have just done now, where people will be privileged to know much more about our Nigeria is is a greatly blessed country with very rich history.
Yeah.
Very, very, very rich history. Nigeria is not by accident. Forget the fact that Lugar's girlfriend Mary Shaw suggested the name Nigeria. Nigeria has come to stay. And I want to advise the new government to take a bold step, to look at areas that need further restructuring in this country, where we notice some lopsidedness, so that the society will be better for it.
Thank you.
And that will be a great relief to the dreams and aspirations of people like you. We need to convoke a talk shop. We need to convoke, you may not call it a constitutional conference, you may call it a conference, because there cannot be two sovereignties as a lawyer, but we need to talk about burning issues, why Kano will have 44 local governments, and Lagos will have 20 local governments. Why there will be more population in the desert region and less population along the coast? If we do this sincerely and genuinely, I want to tell you that Nigeria will be better for it.
Honorable Femi Kehinde,
all the very best.
thank you for featuring on State Affair.
Thank you very much.
And let me thank Ifeanyi Nature. Ifeanyi says, hello Edmond. I'm Ifeanyi from the East. Please, can you bring back Chief Leko Alabi to the new studio? Yes, Leko Alabi will come here someday. The plan is to bring as many brilliant Nigerians as possible into the studio. And I know I will bring Honorable Femi Kehinde again to discuss issues in the studio. This is a class, and I will say he was the teacher today. I was just intervening to direct the discourse, but he was the teacher in the class. And Babawale Olayemi Big Pedro says, this program is by far the best. I always can't miss it. Thank you, Babawale. Egini Alex says, good job, Radio Man. Thank you for joining. Please subscribe to this YouTube account because we are looking at paying more attention to YouTube now. So tell your friends, subscribe so that whenever we come on, you will get the notification. Omotayo Onobamiro, thank you for always joining the broadcast. Shei Ibitoye says he loves history. Yes, I love history too. Thank you all. Don't forget to join us again on Wednesday for another edition of the program. We run the program on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 2 p.m. West African time. 2 p.m. West African time on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Then on Saturday, join me on Splash FM from 8 to 11 a.m. I am Edmond Opilo. I worked with Ayo Ashimolowo, Tosin Ayeni Oladele, and Miriam Giwa to bring you this edition of the program. Thank you for listening.
State Affairs with Edmond Opilo is live.